Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 551 of Constructive Criticism. I am your host, Spencer Holland, as some people call me. Howland, if you want to say it correctly. And I'm joined by Abe Stein.
Yay, I'm back.
Well, welcome back, buddy. I missed you. I did. I missed
I can take it or leave it. I can take it or leave it on April Fool's Day.
I legitimately missed you. I do have a boulder that you could hug, though, if you're a member of the Patreon Discord, to cure all your mental illnesses for our new sponsor. And we're joined by Mason Clark.
Yeah, I think the what you said counts as our, like, they asked us to shout out us being in the top 50 or whatever list things. I think we did it. That counts. We are in the top 100 TCG podcasts in the top 50 top 25, excuse me.
No,
MTG
9.
Podcasts.
The top 10 MTG podcasts.
That's true. Yeah. We actually ended up at 9. So thank you all so much if you engaged and voted with that sort of thing. It is really cool to hear that people like that.
Yeah. It's funny. We ended up on the top 50 Smash podcasts for Smash Through, and I was like, "There's just not enough Smash podcasts." Like,
I was gonna say there were 50 of those.
Yeah.
Like we ended up in like 26th or something. It was pretty cool. We talked about it on the show. But no, being in the top 10 matchup podcasts for FeedSpot, which is actually something that people use. Like the other one is trying to be FeedSpot, but actually being in the top 10 for FeedSpot, where they don't just use Apple reviews, but alleged downloads, Patreon, stuff like that. That's really cool. And just shout out to the listeners for engaging with the content, because that is actually how that happens.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, with that being said, we're not going to dive too much into our accolades the last week and a half. I would actually much rather talk about the DNR announcement, and something that Magic players were pretty ready for and had really, really strong opinions about, including Mason making fun of me with his Death Ray Shaman tweet. I think that this was a weird BNR, before we get into it, where people wanted things from, I think, every format. Where a lot of times I feel like there's a lot of vocalizations for no changes, and I don't think a single format had a no changes group. Maybe Standard did a little bit, but I think Brian Kibler kind of shook it up. So, with that being said, I'm just going to read off the changes, and then we're going to talk about them. So Standard, no changes. Pioneer, no changes. Modern, Underworld Breach is banned. Legacy, Sowing Micah Spawn is banned. Troll of Khazad-dûm is banned. Vintage, no changes. Pauper, Basking Brutescale is banned. Kuldotha Rebirth is banned. Deadly Dispute is banned. Prophetic Prism is unbanned. And High Tide is unbanned. Whew. It's funny, if you had told me how many changes happened, I would have guessed that they were split across formats. But I want to just go by format and talk about it. Mason, what do you think about no changes to Standard?
Yeah, I think it's right. I mean, Standard is a fairly healthy format. There are multiple decks that are viable. There are some things, it's not like Monstrous Rage and Up the Beanstalk aren't good cards and aren't things that warp deck building, but there's always things like that. And I think they've been pretty clear that they need to really have something bad happening in Standard for them to take action, right? That's sort of been what their messaging was moving to the 3-year Standard, in part because players felt they couldn't really invest in cards. So I didn't think we were quite at the level of you have to do something like this, banning Rage and Beanstalk. I think you could argue that one of the mice as well could have been banned. Manifold Mouse is a pretty reasonable thing if you want to go that direction. But ultimately, the format's pretty good. There might be some decks that are cut above, but I don't know. That's kind of how a lot of formats are most of the time. And generally speaking, this is the outcome that made the most sense for me in Standard. I'm interested in sort of, they typically have said they're going to take action normally right before rotation hits, So the next BNR announcement is on June 30th, and that is right before the standard rotation because the next set will release in July when rotation hits. So I'm excited to see sort of, that is a time where like something could actually change if they feel like, okay, for the next year, we missed on beans. It's a bit too strong. We have stuff coming out. We want to hit it, or something along those lines. That's where I'm interested to see that sort of conversation go. But one of the big things I've been kind of thinking a lot about recently is like trying to just accept things for the way they are. And so until something like that happens, I'm just going to sort of, not worry about it in standard and trust that they know what's going on. Because I think standard has been pretty fun for the last while. So.
Yeah, I had a pretty similar group chat with some of my like closest Magic friends about like, yeah, I wish that they had banned Heartfire Hero, just because like, I think that it doesn't actually hurt the red decks, but it opens up other aggro decks in a lot of ways. I know a lot of people want it to be Monstrous Rage, and I don't know. I think that like, I don't actually think that like Beans has ever been problematic. I know that people don't enjoy the play patterns as much, but like it's never been the top deck for long enough for me to worry about it. And then the conversations with like this town ain't big enough, I just think are ridiculous. Like, that's just a fun play pattern that many different decks enjoy. That should not go anywhere. But I like what you said about like just accepting stuff. Like, I mean, Heartfire Hero was one of my hits on that set review. As like, I think I said like, I think this is the best one drop to be printed in. I don't even remember how many years I said. I fully believed it was as good as it is. maybe it's a little bit better than I thought it was. And I don't know. I think that like it's cool to have those cards. And like when it feels like there's nothing you can do about it, like that can suck. But I actually think there is counterplay to Heartfire Hero in the form of Oblivion Bolt and Nowhere to Run and stuff like that. So like it's not like there's nothing. I mean, I think that if we wanted to really get after it, we could even play like I think Disfigure is even in standard. So. I don't know. What about you, Abe?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I was kind of in the camp of looking at the format and hoping to see some change happen. Although I completely understand it's probably not the right time, right? We're on the eve of a set coming out. I wouldn't expect them to take such strong action with new cards about to enter the format. I think that's not necessarily it's not really the best thing to do. For the reason of just not giving the cards a chance, right? Not giving the environment a chance to compete. My fear is, and I think a lot of people's fear in standard right now is that new sets are going to continue to come out, and we have like a pretty historically strong package of aggressive cards. We have a historically strong package of controlling cards in the domain package, and we have like not a lot of room to operate in the middle, and the ways that people have to operate in the middle, I think, are ways that not a lot of players enjoy. When a lot of players enjoy operating in the middle, right? Like there is, I think, a pretty big span of space between up the beanstalk domain decks and mice decks, and a lot of people's favorite Magic, I think, lies in that gap, but there's such a large space between them that I think that it's hard to make like, have a deck that really feels like one of the best decks in the format that plays the way people want. Does that mean that things need to change? I don't think so. I think that there's time to see how it plays out. But overall, I mean, my personal opinion has been that I feel like they threw everything at the wall with trying to make standard a more accessible format that people want to stick with and play more. But I think that has some real costs, right? Like you've changed the identity of standard, and so I don't know. I worry that this could become a pattern. I personally am like a bit concerned about the strength of mice, as we'll talk about, I think, in talking about Pioneer. But like certain packages of cards being just best in class in a way that's not going to be easy to contest. But But it's too soon to say, right? I think the other part of it is that we don't have a ton of pressure on the format. Most of the time, we're just about to enter. RC season for it, so that'll give us some opportunity, and then the upcoming Pro Tour following will also include standards. There's time for things to shake out, and the card pool is big enough for there to be opportunity. But I think that it's both good that there's all this card pool and opportunity, and bad because if you're wrong, right, in the big card pool, maybe the reason things aren't churning is because these cards might be too good, and it might be too late for the players who play a lot of standard to
I think
to make that adjustment.
I think what you just said is really important, though, because like last time there was pressure on standard, people were just like unequivocally Esper Pixie's the best deck, nothing even comes close, and like all of a sudden Domain just comes back on the format and shakes the entire format up again. And there was a huge percentage of the people that's like, listen, like Room Ice has been the best thing since day one. Like it's going to be the best. Like it just has the best aggregate win percentage overall, and I don't think that's changed. Like I do believe that is true for Rule Mice. Obviously, Mono Red does better right now, but I think that when push comes to shove, people end up going back to like questing Druid, Innkeeper's Talent stuff, just to like eke out those last percentages. Is that problematic? If we have another year of that, I think that's a different question. And I agree with you. Like the mice thing is way more interesting where I would have gone, but also we have some. I know that a lot of people are like, oh, we have like an 11 set standard. Like there's no way anything new could shake up the format. We have some really strong, beefy stuff coming with this new set. And I think that they know that, and like Abe has said, like they've made a priority of making sure that the impacts have happened to standard, even when we don't think they will. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry,
Mason.
not to cut you off, Mason.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think that what you said there, Spencer, is really on the money of what I was trying to say. Of like, until we see that it doesn't come up. Right, until we see that the sets are falling short in comparison, it's too soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mason.
Yeah, I think that another thing too is like it's so hard to balance around like the idea of like you want people's cards to hold value and you want players to feel good to invest and you want to have a diverse array of gameplay, and the gameplay of standard is really fun for some subgroup, but it's not for another. But like that's always the case, and like having to balance all of those things and make a decision when you think there's a realistic chance that things could shake up, or that maybe you have this data that conveys it a little differently, I think is really like a hard thing to come down on. And in that same vein, I think it's really hard for people who only play standard as their main form of Magic to not want to spice things up a little, right? Like I do think these two archetypes are showing up a ton in games. And for what's worth, when I talk about like the aggro stuff, I really mean like mice plus monstrous rage, however you want to like accompany those cards together. So whether that's Boros, whether that's Gruul, whether that's mono red, even we see Izzet doing some stuff from some players. So like I get it. It's like, man, I feel like I'm playing against a lot of these cards a lot at the same time. That's also just the nature of sometimes the standard formats is you see more of something, and sometimes things come out, sometimes decks adapt, sometimes just one or two sideboard cards make a huge difference, or one or two new decks introduced to the metagame now change things dramatically. You lose a good matchup and gain a bad matchup, and now you see it a little less. And so I don't know. I think it's really hard from both sides. I understand where play, especially people who really only play standard. I get where you're coming from on wanting something like that, especially if this is like your main game. And for some people, like Arena is, and they spend like 4 or 5 hours a day playing. This is like how they relax, and I'm sympathetic to that.
That's interesting that you said it, because as you were talking, I was thinking back, and like, I'll go back as far as like Squadron Hawk standard, or like even in there you had like Squadron Hawk versus Lotus Cobra versus Primeval Titan versus Vengevine, really, before like the actual bans had to happen. And like Lotus, like you were either a Lotus Cobra deck, a Lotus Cobra Primeval deck, a Lotus Cobra Vengevine deck, a Squadron Hawk deck, or a or I think a Vampires deck was probably the other thing that you would be doing. And it's funny because yeah, there weren't combo decks then, but then the next set comes out, and the next set comes out, and we just get Splinter Twin in Standard that lasted for years, and that nobody could actually do because we're all too stupid apparently to play Splinter Twin in Standard, even though it had the best win percentage. And then even the Tarkiriers, we couldn't even agree on which the best Siege Rhino deck was between the little mid-range deck and the big mid-range deck. And I just think that there's always, I think that Carmen said this in the Magic video, the best today, there's always going to be a best at something, right? Yes, Heartfire Hero is the best one drop. We have figured that out. That's true. We are probably not going to make a one drop better than Heartfire Hero in the next few years. Because that's too good of a we pushed this card and we did it. Up the Beanstalk is the best card advantage engine since Uro, and we're probably not gonna make a card advantage engine as good as Up the Beanstalk. And I think that's okay. It's what Mason said, right? You get to say all right, my Up the Beanstalks will have some value in some deck. My Heartfire Heroes will have some value in some deck. And it becomes about positioning and stuff like that at that point.
Yeah, and the last thing that I'll say on this that I think is important, because I don't know, I think there's been a big Magic boom, especially in Standard, from the pandemic era to now, where a lot of people picked up Magic because they either played it before, or they heard about it, or they had some free time, and a lot of those players are really becoming blossoming RC competitors. I coach a lot of people from this era, and I would say that a thing that I try and impart quite often, especially from people that feel maybe a little humoristic about it, is that since I started playing, and we'll just say Theros, because I did play a little bit during Gatecrash, but not a ton, but I started playing in Theros casually, started competing, trying to get to the Pro Tour and do better at Grand Prix stuff in Amonkhet. In that entire time, I have never seen a Standard format where the wide majority of people, 80%, agree that this is a great Standard. There's always complaints. It's always not right for somebody, and it might not be right for you. This might not be your kind of format. You might not like these things, and there might be other formats that do provide things you like, and that might just mean you need to go elsewhere. It might also just mean these things are cyclical. We have red decks and go way over the top decks good for a while, and then maybe bouncy decks are great for a little while. These things do change a lot, and I am sympathetic to well, I like this, I like Standard. Unfortunately, that's just not the nature of this beast. So yeah,
I get it, man. Sometimes you want to play an unplayable deck with Hidden Stockpile, and that wouldn't be possible in a format like this, and you have to accept the fact that Hidden Stockpile is an unplayable Magic card. But sometimes that's just true. I mean, it was always true, but more on this one. Abe, talk to me about Pioneer. This is your soapbox that you often have, but I think it changed.
I mean, I don't know. I just think Pioneer it's hard to say whether Pioneer is in a place where it's in need of help, or it's in a place where it's just festering. When is the next the arena, the Pioneer Arena Championships happened? Sorry, Explorer Championships.
It's the same format, but yes.
Mm-hmm.
Happened over the weekend. I believe it was it 6 or 7 of 8? 6 of 8 in the top 8 were playing mono red. The mono red deck looks quite a bit like the mono red deck in Standard right now, which I think puts into context kind of just how good some of the threats we have are on right. But also I think having played the deck in the Pioneer Challenge over the weekend myself, I think is more a testament to a lack of real effort in trying to beat it.
Oh, I'm so glad you said this.
And I think that until people have a reason to play Pioneer, it's very hard to say if the format is in a terrible spot and everything's bad and everything needs to be banned and reevaluated and shaken up, or if we need to have any reason to have players who care about the results,
dude,
on a long-term scale, play the format a lot.
The discourse about this format online this week was crazy, where it was like, well, obviously this is the only event that has mattered in X number of months, so like this is the only thing that we should base anything off of, so thus it deserves a ban. And it's like, I don't know, like, people played...
Can I step in real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just while you're thinking about how you want to say this, just so people know, the BNR decision was made before this event happened.
3 weeks,
I see
3 weeks
constantly
before,
online,
they said.
And people go like, oh, this event just happened. And, you know, let's just pretend the event is like damning evidence. I don't believe that, but let's play along. Even if it was,
it's definitely not.
They yeah, but just bear with me.
I know.
Yeah. Even if it was, you cannot get a serious conversation with the people that matter, get it written up for the thing, get it changed, you know, localized to different languages, right? Like Magic is an international game, and make all that happen, even with it ending midday on a Sunday, right? Like that is 8 hours. You can do a lot with 8 hours. It's just not a realistic thing.
No.
And no one tournament even matters that much. You know, I'm of the hot take that Pro Tours don't even matter this much, right? Like it's fine. We had this event happen, but also just in case you're like looking at this, they didn't have that information when they made this choice. Now, you know, as you can tell from the way Spencer and I are talking, we don't believe this to be such information that it should tear the sky down. But even if you do, you can't really judge them on it because they didn't have it either. And maybe you think this process is bad or whatever, that's a different conversation. But the truth of the matter is they didn't have this data. And we know that to be a fact with how things work.
Well, they said it on the stream today. They were like, no, the Pioneer decision was made 3 weeks ago. Like, we're not changing it. Like, and I just, listen, is red aggro better? The thing is, we did a video on our YouTube channel this week where red aggro dominated some challenges right before this event. And I played the decks, and I was like, is Mice even better than Prowess? Like, legitimately, is it better? And I'm not even sure that it is still. Like, legitimately, I think that, yes, it presents a faster clock in certain situations, but if you want to beat it, it's actually much easier to beat in Pioneer than the Prowess deck is. And it, like, this is the first time that, like, a big event happened where people are like, oh no, I'll 1-drop, 2-drop you, deal you 4, and if you don't do anything, you die next turn. But, like, I don't know. When the Prowess deck came out, it also dominated the SEG. Like, every time an aggro deck comes out in this format where people don't respect aggro, this happens. And I don't think this is it. Like, I legitimately... listen, you clip it, like, I could be wrong. Mice is very strong. Don't get me wrong. But I would not be surprised to see this lose its luster with... Actually, no, I'm going to say this. Think about the mirror. You're playing the mirror against Mice, and you have a Soulscar mage, and they have a Heartfire hero. Who is favored in that situation, Abe?
Depends on how many rule spells you have in your hand.
Like, for real?
Yeah. I think you're getting too into the like.
I know I am.
Yeah,
but
just like holistically, when you look at like a format and things like this, knee-jerk reactions to stuff like this is never good, and it is not the way that Wizards of the Coast operates. If you do not like that,
nor should they, right?
Yeah, I believe they shouldn't. But like, if you don't like that, that is a fine critique to have. And you have signed a social contract that you're going to play their game. And there are lots of games and lots of other formats, and some formats get managed differently than others. But at the end of the day, the Pioneer format has had no pressure. And we have just seen time and time again this exact story happen with Pioneer. Oh, wow, Pioneer is so cool. There is this one deck that is a problem, but besides that, whatever. Then the RC or, like a big event comes around. It puts a lot of pressure on Pioneer, and Pioneer has basically every time looked different. And the incentives for players are to copy deck lists they think are solid on Magic Online, that are easy for them to pick up and play, because most players are not there to really play Pioneer because they love it. They might like it a lot, but to them, it's sort of like, oh, I want to play the tournament. This sounds like fun. I, on last Wednesday, was going to play the Pioneer prelim with some friends on Discord. I queued up the mono red deck because I was like, oh, this looks like fun. And I just it's done well in some events. I don't really want to play any of the other decks. I'll play this one. The prelim ended up not firing or whatever, but that is just what people are going to do. And it is a very strong shell. And until people push you off it, it doesn't matter. And it really we should be thinking about things in bigger pictures. And the fact that people want this, but they also are cool with Treasure Cruise now, just shows how short-sighted and how different, basically just how hard this job is, and how much loud people dominate the conversation, because it will be like this for a little bit, and then Treasure Cruise will come back for a bit, and then Green will come back and then Rakdos. Before all this 2 months ago, you would have talked to people, they would have said, yeah, it's Rakdos, Demons, and Phoenix, those decks are dominating Pioneer, it's time to get rid of Fable. That was what some people who were playing the format a lot were saying. Now look at us. Just give things time and let them marinate, and let people have chances to do stuff with pressure. We had some pressure for the Arena PT. I don't think it's the hugest pressure cooker in the world, but what we saw? Demons got put down, Red got picked up. Let's see what happens with a little bit more time. Let's give players a chance to respond.
I'm so with you, Mason, and I'm so glad you brought up that pattern with Pioneer, which for me always comes back to Treasure Cruise being the problem, because it's so hard to people so often just get caught up in, and I think it's cross formats, right? People get caught up in, oh, well, looking at the MTG Goldfish decks, this deck is just the best deck and wins all the time. And oh my God, I follow Fire Shoes, and he tweeted that there was 17 red decks in the top 32 of the last 2 challenges. Okay, well, that was the weekend. What about next weekend? What about the weekend before that? What were the results there? It's not always, even looking at Underworld Breach in Modern. Sure, it was the best deck, but that deck was the best deck by a wide margin. People were playing a lot of things, and it still didn't have those kinds of results every weekend, right? There were still other decks people played every weekend and succeeded with every weekend that weren't that. So it's hard for people to kind of let go of that, I think, sometimes, but it's so important too, because it's you don't get the full picture of a format unless you're really seeing people try and break it. And that's why you see a deck that just shows up, try and use the new cards in a better way for the decks it's playing against, Phoenix and Rakdos and some other various mid-range decks, and it's so successful. But that's what the format looked like, and now that it's known, exactly, give people time to respond.
Dude, it's so funny too, because this format is, we're talking about cards that came out less than 10 months ago, just needing to be banned in this format, whereas 2 years ago, I don't know, I think it's funny. I think we're going to talk about this card a lot next week, I have no doubt, in Glacial Dragon Hunt, but it's not the problem deck is getting worse. It is getting better in Glacial Dragon Hunt. And I think that pretending anything else than that is happening is interesting. Because, it is also a good card against these decks. I don't know. I agree with you, Mason. I think that people, they overreact.
They overreact, and they don't listen to the people in charge and get opinion. And once again, you can disagree with these people, but just like try and have conversations the way they are. I think is such an important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah. Next up is Modern. This is the one that did have a change. It's the one that we all said was going to happen, but is the one that I think somehow people are the most upset about. I think people really wanted an unbanned of... I think there were 2 cards. Mason, correct me if I'm wrong. You're more online than I am. But, like, Deathrite Shaman, and then for some reason, Cataxian Probe or Preordain were the other 2.
I haven't heard anyone. Well, Preordain's unbanned, so.
Oh wait,
I
meant Ponder. Sorry.
Yeah, I haven't heard anyone talk about Cataxian Probe. I have heard Ponder and I have heard Deathrite Shaman, and I think we talked a little bit about this last week at some point during the show. We had discussed like maybe Deathrite, and then sort of us also having a conversation.
I thought they would both get unbanned for what, like, just transparency. I thought Deathrite Shaman and Ponder were getting unbanned. Like and Mason, you had a really strong point about like letting things happen.
Yeah, like I think there's a couple things. One, I think that, you know, like to your point about like unbanning things, I think giving things time to breathe and experience different formats and different shapes and different textures is really good from like a game design and like a philosophy type thing. And it's not a race, is what I always tell people, to get everything off the ban list that could be. You know, like I believe it is cooler for us to, for example, let's say that we were going to unban those 2 cards, Spencer, right? Like you and I are in charge and we make all the decisions, and I agree with you. I would plead with you that it is cooler for us to do Ponder or Deathrite first, give it some time, then do the other one, right? And I think that we saw this sort of huge, like, wide departure in the last BNR that set people up to feel like this BNR could be different. And I mentioned on the show last week that I feel like this BNR that we're talking about today was really a defining one, because our last one for Modern, I mean, we saw 2 cards get banned, 4 cards get unbanned. That is one of the bigger shakeups in any format, really, in the last couple of years. And the question was, is that because we need to inject new things into Modern, get it back to feeling a certain way, maybe a less Horizon-y, or is this the new philosophy? And they sort of talked about today that, like, while they did discuss potentially maybe doing unbans and things like that, they decided to sort of go the route of, let's ban this thing that caused a lot of problems. And then we just gave people all these new toys that kind of got overshadowed by one of them, right? Creating this big issue. Let's see what things are like with these other toys, right? And in a lot of ways, I think that like today's BNR is sort of like a second chance for a thing like Faithless Looting to really make it. You know, and we did see Faithless Looting do well with Hollow 1 at some of the RCs with players qualifying for the Pro Tour with it. I know Abe's friend did quite well, I believe, getting top 64. I don't know where she landed on if she qualified or not, but
she lost 2 win-ins, unfortunately.
The back win-in is brutal. Your deck was great. I got to commentate. It was a blast. But, you know, like those sort of things are kind of now back on the menu in a weird way. And, you know, I do think it's reasonable for a card like Ponder or Deathrite Shaman in the next, you know, 2 to 3 years to be unbanned. I don't think it's like outside the limits, but we just had all these other things unbanned and let us have a little time to let them breathe. You know, it wouldn't be even unrealistic to me if in 6 months maybe one of those got unbanned. But I think today they really showed that, like, hey, our philosophy is maybe a little bit more willing to make these kind of big changes, but we are going to try and give you time to experience lots of different shapes of the format and give you time. And we've seen some cool things pop up. You know, the LCQs today, one of my friends actually like 5-0'd playing a Just Guy Ascendancy Emery Moxopol deck. That's really cool.
I'm so glad you brought this up.
And like, there's just a lot of different things that you can do. And, you know, it's not like, you know, this Underworld Breach thing is going to change how some people feel about the format. But I do think it's sort of the quote unquote right thing to do when you think about a 30-year game. And, you know, maybe it makes a little bit more sense to do a bigger change if we have been like a shorter lifespan game. And that's a big thing I think about a lot. It's just sort of how do you make Magic the most fun for the longest period of time. So that's my whole diatribe.
I love a lot of what you said, and I want to highlight some of the points that you made. So, like, we talked about this on the podcast. So I'm going to talk about like Marauding Mako as like Yeah. So this card's really good. Fits into a Pioneer deck that is, or sorry, a Modern deck that is really good when Faithless Looting gets unbanned. And I believe won the Portland 5K, even though it was like a split, and then beyond. Like, I think that like Marauding Mako plus Faithless Looting is actually like a pillar of this format moving forward. As like an aggressively slanted synergy deck. And I don't know if that can exist in a format where there are like legitimately very rare but real turn 2 kills for Breach. And I don't know. I think that Modern just like doesn't have a rules of engagement that Wizards has set anymore. And that makes things harder for people to understand where they're supposed to operate. And I don't know that that's Wizards' fault. Like, that's just like part of the card pool getting bigger. But I really think that like the only banning Underworld Breach and is, I mean, obviously, Abe, you have probably a strong opinion about this given your circumstance, but like, yeah, like Mox Opal probably is once again one of the strongest cards in Modern, but I kind of don't hate that. Like maybe I'm in the minority, like, but I don't hate the fact that like if I am willing to do this, I get fast mana. Abe, what about you?
I think this is the only ban that makes sense for now, because I think that since the unban, there has only been one clear problematic deck, and it functions with Underworld Breach. I think that everything Mason said is very smart about how to manage the format of Modern. I think it gets, and I think it's actually case in point, the fact that every time there's a BNR, the number one thing, to the point where I am sick of hearing about it, is the word unban. The number one thing people want to talk about is, ooh, what if they just gave me a sprinkling of dopamine of getting to maybe play with this card I remember playing with? Like, that is such a powerful effect that clearly, as we look at what happened with Modern Horizons 3 and Nadu and just this entire, and the One Ring and just all of this malaise about the format, that it could be undone and reinvigorated by giving a lot of this, right? We had to engage several cards worth of big impact to the format. I think that all of that tells a story of unbanning aggressively isn't what's best for the enjoyment of the format, and also I think is much more dangerous, because as you even look at things now, I think a lot of people who I've talked to have said that they feel like Mox Opal is a card that still should go. It's way too good, was banned for a reason. And if that's the case, I mean, you have to give it time for it to run around. But if that's the case, and Wizards is wrong about this, imagine how like bad that looks. And if you have that happen several times by unbanning cards, I mean, all you're doing is proving why the ban list was right in the first place. And I think it's just not a good position to be in. I don't think it's like what's best for the format. And I think right now things have a lot of opportunity to be better than they were, and we need to see what the environment looks like. And I think the Breach was the only thing really smothering things. Like, I don't think that adding more powerful cards to your format necessarily makes it better. And I think that that's also something that Modern Horizons, I think, is something a lot of players feel when they complain about maybe Horizon sets being too much, is that adding more powerful cards to the format doesn't necessarily make it a better and more fun format.
So I agree with that, for what it's worth. I do think the answer cards, though, often make a format more enjoyable.
We did that and we banned half of them.
Well, yes, I do agree with that. I just want to know, because I actually don't know your guys' opinion on it. Do you think that Deathrite Shaman should be banned, Abe?
Yes.
Oh, I vastly disagree. Mason?
Yeah, I think it should be banned. I don't think it's. I think
you could make an argument for it to not be banned, and I think that has legitimacy to it. I just don't think it should be unbanned. And I also think that if it ends up not being particularly good and it is safe to unban, that is really depressing. Like, look at
dude, that's the exact thing I was gonna bring up. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, this is the thing we actually talked about some when I worked on MH3, was like the idea that, like, if you unban a card that people have fond memories of and it doesn't hold up anymore, it can potentially tarnish their view on the card in general, right? So Splinter Twin being someone's favorite card and having all these fond memories that comes back and it isn't, close to good enough currently, well, that doesn't lead to like a lot of cool memories. Whereas like when it's banned, it's like, oh, this was so broken, I wish they'd give it back, like it was so good, it would solve these issues or whatever. And I think Splinter Twin is way worse than Deathrite Shaman. But I think you do have a chance of like potentially unbanning something that doesn't even hit that much. If it doesn't hit that much, I think it doesn't really do anything, right? And then if it does too much, you have issues. Like you could argue Mox Opal sort of is in that, like, bordering on that camp, right? Of like, what's going on? And I think Green Sun Faithless Looting have been kind of great, where it's like, we are great additions to decks. We have people thinking about some stuff. We've helped support new and existing decks, Pog. And my real question is, like, does Deathrite do that?
I think it does. I think it does what the cards you just said do, and it also puts a check on the format of, like, you don't get to just be a one-trick pony. Like, you have to really invest in what's happening. I
don't know what you're saying.
I don't think there are any decks that are one-trick ponies that are really good. Like, I guess Storm is like kind of the exception, but it has pretty consistently had like huge error bars on its data because it is so disparate. Like Storm is really a deck that succeeds and dies for some sideboard cards, right? I will die on this hill. I might not actually, but I do think that like this was a good conversation because I legitimately thought either Ponder or Deathrite Shaman was getting unbanned. I think that the Ponder one made more sense, but like the Deathrite one, there's just like no mid-range deck. Like here's
my question for you, Spencer.
There's no mid-range deck.
Well,
here's my question for you, Spencer, about Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about before, you and I talked about Ocelot Pride and Guide of Souls.
Yeah.
And at times Ragavan as being
they're not as good. They're better than Deathrite Shaman.
I think that's incorrect.
I think they're different.
I think that Deathrite Shaman, I think they're very different cards. I think Deathrite Shaman is a much more powerful card, not only for its ease of access to its most powerful modes by just playing fetch lands in your modern deck, which most people are doing all the time anyway, but also as a color pipe break. Like, black having a mana dork, as we saw in Legacy at the time, like...
But that never happened. That didn't happen, though. Don't say that.
It did happen.
No,
in Grixis Delver, it was actively a turn one mana dork that then
not in Modern.
In Modern, it was a Jund mana dork, but you could have played Grixis with it.
I'm just saying that it didn't happen in Modern. It happened in Legacy, but it didn't happen in Modern.
Which format right now do you think that Modern currently resembles more?
All right.
Yeah.
I won't argue with that. Thank you, Abe.
Yeah, Abe also, to be fair, was saying like he was using Legacy as the alias, right? But yeah, I do think Abe's right that like Modern now looks more like that than it did then. I also just think that like there's different incentives, right? Like, don't get me wrong. I think, we messed up a bit when it comes to Ocelot Pride, Guide of Souls. Some on us, some on them.
Who's them? Wait, hold on. Who's them?
Like bouncing around Fury, I think it's kind of a mistake or whatever.
Then being
like if you're told like Fury's going to be a part of the format and you like check and balance things with that in mind, and then you remove that limiter, that changes things a lot, right? Like I have played a lot of Ocelot Pride versus Omnath. It's very, very good for Omnath when you have the card.
Let's be clear that a lot of people wanted Fury unbanned.
Yeah, I think Fury is the best unban of all the ones listed. But I also think I wouldn't do it for like another year. I will circle back to that really quickly once I finish this last little point real quick, which is just the incentives. Like Deathrite Shaman, like Abe said, is like involving bare minimum fetch lands, which you already want to play, and then just having instant sorceries, which most decks want to do, and also like they don't even have to be your own in order to work, where Ragavan and Ocelot Pride typically just need to engage in combat, which is much more normal for decks to engage with. And healthy to have a card that engages in that way against other decks, like to punish them, right? Deathrite Shaman just needs to sort of be in play and then sort of doesn't become a part of the game as much. And sort of like the combat steps. So like these other cards incentivize attacking for the most part, or playing to the board, which are like generally better places for your 1-drops to be, because while they can be incredibly snowbally, they also can sometimes just get checked by a thing like Scion of Draco, for example. So that was my first thought. My other thought is that, like, and we actually mentioned someone, we saw someone in the Patreon talk about like how they bought Deathrite Shamans because there were lots of people talking about Deathrite potentially getting unbanned and they didn't want to get got. I sometimes worry a little bit about saying stuff unless I like feel really confident it's going to happen, because I don't want someone to spend money because they really trust me, right? Like, there are people who listen to like what I say and they have a lot of reverence or whatever for it, and I feel like there's a responsibility to maybe not lead them down a path unless I kind of truly believe in it. I do truly believe Fury would be the best unban. I also just don't think it's going to happen for a couple of years because it just got banned. And I think one of the things that Wizard of the Coast is sort of maybe a little, I would argue, not great about is they get a little prideful at times about stuff like this. And I just don't think they would unban Fury, you know, like less than a calendar year later, right? Like I don't think they would do that. So I feel weird about like saying, like, I did not sell my Furies. I will not sell my Furies. I think it's fair to unban that card, and healthy too. But I just don't think it's going to happen until like 2026 at the soonest.
I had a personal conversation with, I'm debating if I want to say who it was. I am going to say who it was, because I don't think he'll mind. I had a personal conversation with PV about this, where I made a tweet that he impacted the price of a couple cards when they got unbanned. And his response is like, hey, like he texted me, like we texted about it, and he was like, hey, like, I don't think that I control that much of the price. Like, I think that the scalpers and the people that are the investors control it way more than the competitive Magic community, and that if we ever say that the competitive Magic community is in charge of prices, we are lying to ourselves, because it is about the people that are building. We're not a finance podcast, but I when he said that, I just thought about it a little bit, and I just agree. Like, I just think that, like, yes, somebody could buy a card off of what you said, but it wouldn't affect the price.
But I didn't say that.
Okay.
What I said is they might like do something, and I don't want them to spend their money on something that I also think, for example, like I just said, I think Fury is a good unban. I think it is a net positive to Modern.
Yeah.
And a lot of the complaints that people have. I really don't think they're going to do it. So I feel a little weird sometimes saying it, because I don't want someone to spend, like, I think Fury's like $4 right now. But let's pretend Fury was $15 just for the sake of the conversation, $60. That is not a cheap amount of money for some people.
That's a whole video game.
It's a great point. It's a whole video game. It's like multiple movies, you know, it's like 2 tanks of gas or whatever. Like it's a lot. And some people know that, like, if Fury does get unbanned, it will go back to its old price probably. And they don't want to miss out on it. So they get this fear. And I don't think that I am such a big content creator that, like, I control the price or that sort of thing. But I do know people who have bought things because of things I've tweeted and have said, and I just want to make sure that, like, kind of going forward for the last year, that I'm a bit more careful about it, because I don't want to, like, send someone down the wrong path. You know what I mean? And I don't want them to get got and feel bad, because I had someone come up to me where they were like, oh, I like bought this deck that you tweet about, whatever, and this wasn't very good, you know? And I was like, oh, well, when I tweeted about it, I thought it was like a fun, exciting thing. And I kind of hope that, like, you had at least fun with it. I'm sorry it wasn't, like, the best thing ever. You know what I mean? They were like, yeah.
I think that's part of content creation. And, like, I think that is what PV was saying, is, like, I don't know, like, no matter what any of the three of us do, unless we become, you know, the second best Magic player or first best Magic player of all time, we'll never be him. Like, I don't know. Like, we just won't have the impact that he has.
Yeah, but I don't think that matters. Like, I feel a personal obligation to this. Does that make sense? Like, this is
it does. Somebody already told me that they bought Deathrite Shamans because I thought it was going to get unbanned, but like, I did think it was going to get unbanned, so I don't feel bad for saying that I thought it was.
I'm not saying you should feel bad. Okay. No one's saying that.
I guess I'm confused as to what you're saying then.
I think Mason's just saying that he feels a responsibility to not say something like, "I think Fury should be unbanned," as like a, or "I think Fury will be unbanned" as a firm statement, because he feels responsible for the money that people spend as an action of that information.
You just don't say anything ever.
I think he just doesn't. He's very mindful of what he says, right? He wouldn't put his word behind. I think that's just what Mason's saying.
Okay.
Yeah, what I'm saying is I just try to be careful about something like that could be like a potentially like I feel a little weird commenting on Mox Opal, for example. Like, a lot of people like, should you buy them, should you not? And I gave the disclaimer that like, I don't know or whatever, right? But I was like, but I'm pretty sure Underworld Breach will be banned before Mox Opal. And I told people I bought Mox Opals, right? Like, whatever you want to do, you want to do. It's different for me. My job is like Magic or whatever. But like, that is the information I have. And I just feel weird personally. I'm not saying other people should feel this way or not feel this way. I'm just saying I personally don't want to say something like that and influence something like that if I'm not like very, very, very confident that it will happen. If I, for example, in 2027, late 2026, you'll probably see me talk about Fury if things are on the current trajectory still, right? Like, if we were in the same spot now, we will then. I will probably talk about it because I think that's more realistic and like potentially better. But I also just, just caution myself against that, because I've seen it affect people, not in like, oh no, this person lost their house sort of way, but they were bummed or whatever. And so I just try to personally, be a little more mindful of it than I was previously.
I love your empathy.
That's all I'm saying.
I want to say that I love your empathy. I'm sorry if I came across that I didn't love your empathy. So, like, that's not what I was saying. I want to do a quick one on two things. The first one is Pauper. I just want to say that, Mason, earlier you mentioned the modern changes from the last BNR, and that's basically what's happened to Pauper. I think that pretending that any of us will know what these Pauper changes will do is nonsensical. This is a format that you can qualify for the Mox with, to qualify for the Pro Tour. Like, we used to have a Pauper podcast with this network, and like, I don't know, and I don't think any of us could know what this will do. Huge, massive changes. Does anybody have anything to add to that?
No, I don't follow Pauper. Like, it and Vintage are kind of my blind spots. So I don't really feel super comfortable commenting on it. It looks cool enough or whatever. And I know like the Common Grounds guys, or some people local to me, they really love Pauper, and they like really try to stay connected and take a level-headed approach to something like that. So if Pauper is something for you, maybe check out their thoughts. But yeah, I think for most people,
And they were actually people that joined the Common Knowledge podcast, I believe, for cross-promotion episodes when they were in our network. So like, definitely check them out. Legacy. This is not the bans that I expected, and I just want to cover it really fast. 100% expected Sowing Microspawn to get banned. I don't even think it's a power level thing. I think it's a play pattern thing. This doesn't belong in the format. Mason, you can talk this about it, but it wasn't designed for the format. Like, nobody expected you to be able to do what this thing does, and it just didn't belong in the format, and that's okay. Mason?
No, I mean, like, we kind of knew it was going to be messed up with like the Eldrazi stuff. That's not the point.
Like, well, the Wasteland thing is the reason they banned it, but
yeah, what I'm saying is like it getting turboed out or whatever, right? I played some. I talked about on the podcast. I played some Legacy recently. I got like Ugined into Sowing Microspawn, grab a land, play another one, Wasteland, you idiot. And I'm just like, all right, well, I guess I'm dead.
They have 6 power and play, have 0 lands. Let's go.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't know. It just happens. It's just strong magic. So like I think that like we knew we were releasing some beast into Modern whenever we made MH3, into Legacy, but like I don't know, that's just not how life goes. I like the troll ban because I just don't think you can ban cards like Reanimate So
Yeah, I was gonna say this really feels like a defining another card that's in the brainstorm tier specifically.
yeah,
Of like everyone remembering, reanimate. It's in the brainstorm tier. Too much. It's too good an old card that's too fun to play with and too identity centric. Reanimate.
So hold on.
Untouchable.
I don't actually think this hurts blue black because the most recent blue black deck is actually not the one that they're hitting. It's actually the new Entomb deck, Tempo deck, and I just would have been Entomb. I know that it's nonsensical for a lot of Legacy players. But like, if you wanted this format, Troll is not it. Like, just ban Entomb. Just like, stop giving people 1 mana.
we should ban days too during down that way, right? Like,
I listen. Hold on.
like what I'm saying is you're balancing for competitive, and they're balancing for experience because Legacy's a casual format.
Oh, man, you're gonna hurt so many of our listeners' feelings right now.
Like, yes, there are ways to get to the Pro Tour, like you can get to the mocks and stuff, but they are more the outlier than the normal, and like that is okay. Like, you also can have a format where like the balance is a bit more like, hey, we want to maintain these sort of pillars, like Abe was saying at the beginning,
yes,
and still have it be competitively diverse and like serious. That is up to you. It is not up to me. You know, like the way you choose to engage and view it. It is just very clear that they're like, yeah, you know what? There's a bunch of cards that should be banned, but they're not for format identity. And this is just apparently, you know, like I think Abe hit the nail on the head. It seems like Entomb and Reanimate are encroaching or maybe in that camp, at least in Wizards' eyes.
Oh, dude, they definitely are. Like, it's just it'd be, especially when you play the 3 together. Now it's just like you get to do whatever you want. No,
yeah,
go ahead.
No. I was gonna say I think like one of the things I like about this banning is like it hits that type of deck. Maybe it diversifies things. Yes, like the new Kaido stuff was doing betterish or whatever. But like it's at least a ban that also doesn't ruin collections or ruin decks, you know? And it's sort of like, okay, we're trying to make some inroads, you know, let's see like how this does and then adjust from there. So
yeah, I have only dabbled in Legacy the last little while. And I thought that the blue black tempo deck, which was the best performing deck for the last little while, was really fun. I worry that we have done exactly what Abe said when like Entomb, Reanimate, and Brainstorm is like, well, we have these 3.
That's a feature.
Like, exactly, Abe. Talk about it for just a second. Like you.
I mean, it's just that's the format. I anecdotally speaking, there's someone who used to live near me, and we grew up together. He became someone who played only Legacy. He had like a really pimped out collection of like he had his lands deck. He like nearly qualified for the Pro Tour at the huge Legacy GP in New Jersey. He just like lost. He lost back-to-back win-ins and made an X2-1. Didn't get a past-end invite. He like loved Legacy to death, and he's selling out because at this point there's not enough of the identity of the format he fell in love with left in there, and the cards are too expensive. I think that is like probably the most common thing happening in Legacy communities these days, especially people who are entrenched. And I think a part of that is the draw of Legacy, right? The same way people play pre-modern and formats like that is getting to play with those cards, and the more you do to not relegate those cards, the better. You know, it's just that's Legacy stuff, right? Like it's Days, it's Force of Will, it's Brainstorm, it's Wasteland, it's Entomb, it's Reanimate. Here we are. It's Ancient Tomb, it's City of Traders, it's all of
it. Mason, if you got one ban or unban on the next BNR, what are you doing?
I'm not changing anything. I don't have the information right now. Not worth my time. I mean, Abe. I would do Fury or whatever if I had to, like, gun to my head, but...
Abe?
I mean, Treasure Cruise and Pioneers, I hate it. That's just me being petty, to be honest. I can't even say I know well enough, but that's just me being a hater. Like, to be 100% real, haterade.
Yeah, I would love to say Deathwatch Shaman unban. Like, I don't think you guys changed my mind. It's fine, like, I could be wrong, but, like, you just ban the card if you're wrong, right? Like...
The heart wants what it wants.
Yeah. Let's move on. Patreon shout out this week comes to Severin. Severin, shout out. Thank you so much for being a patron. If you become a patron of $5 or more, like Severin did, you get a Patreon question like Dr. Martin. Shout out to Mr. Jacob Martin getting his doctorate. Always improving. We very much appreciate it. If you had to choose between having dinner with your favorite book character or having your favorite book made into a movie, which would you choose? If your favorite book has already been adapted, move to the next on your list. Abe?
I would definitely take I can't even identify what my favorite book is off the top of my head that hasn't been made into a movie. But I think in the dark, I would definitely choose Dinner because I've never loved a movie adaptation of a book that I've read as much as I like the book. So that would be disappointing, whereas maybe having dinner with someone from a book that I enjoyed would be satisfying.
I'll go next. My favorite character in any book ever is Oramus from the book Eldest, which is the second book in the Inheritance cycle, which is the Aragon cycle. The worst movie adaptation of all time for any book is probably Aragon. I can't think of a worse one. I would much rather have a good... I mean, I know they're doing it on Disney Plus as a TV series. I'm very excited for it, but like, I think I'd rather have Dinner with Oramus than even even getting renewed for Eldest. Like, even if it fails, I'd rather have... I think Oramus taught me more about being like a good person and about understanding like what philosophy even means than anything other than maybe The Good Place. So I have, it's behind me, but I actually have the What We Owe to Each Other on paperback from The Good Place behind me. Like, I just think that like Oramus puts like the golden rule to like the ultimate test. He does so much that I would want to learn what this dude knew for his 500 years or whatever of life. So, Mason?
Good Night, Poon Poon. That is the one I would want.
Is that a book?
Yeah, it's a manga. But yeah.
But
Good Night, Poon Poon.
You want it like live action, anime style?
Yeah, I want Poon Poon. If you've read it, I want it live action with the hand drawn Poon Poon. Basically, he and his family all look like little ducks, and everyone else looks like people. And it's sort of like his self image or whatever. And I want the story told. I wanted a shot for shot recreation. That's what I want. Or like
you want it like Space Jam style with the animations drawn on.
I want it to look raggedy. Actually, I want it to be like if you know Poon Poon, like black line, little duck. Like he doesn't have a lot of details. He's like has his nose, has his eyes, and he's like an oval. I want it like that, and I want everyone to play it straight face. Like that's like just the way it is.
70s cartoons where like live action. Do you know what I'm talking about, Dave?
Yeah, like I want Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yeah, like the 70s, 80s like live action cartoon stuff.
Yeah, the hybrid. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I was saying with the Space Jam style.
Yeah, I know what you were saying, but I think he wanted it like less high depth. Like he wanted it like kind of rigidity.
Poon Poon to our chat on Discord, so you get an idea. This is not the best one because it's kind of got Poon Poon in the front, but behind it is like a scene where it's like, you know, he is just a little bird with his little feet and his nose, and she's like a well-drawn person. You know? Like
I love this.
Yeah, I want Poon Poon like that, and I want the people in, you know, great like Academy Award winning attire. You know,
you want Oscar-winning performances from the whole cast.
Yeah.
While this bedsheet bird,
exactly. Yeah.
Bedsheet bird.
Yeah. I want, you know, honestly, the Good Night Poon Poon miniseries is probably the way to do it. But yeah, this is what I want.
If you want to support the show, you can check out our sponsors. You can go to untapped.gg in the show notes. They have the #1 arena decklist tracker and tracker overall for limited. They're really great, and as the set comes out in, I think, 7 days from today, so of the time of the recording, like, they're definitely worth it. And then Mana Traders, you just go to CCMTG1, click the link in the show notes. I see y'all using it, and listen, they're crushing it over there on MTGO. People were really happy about the changes today to decrease lag, to change the top 8s to have the higher seed go first, things like that. They are constantly doing things to improve the competitive landscape if you're looking to play competitive Magic online, so check that out. I didn't grab it, but I do have a mug for Abe that came to my house today.
I'm so close to drinking some things out of it. I'm this close.
My wife is like, what did you get from this website? I was like, nothing. I've never bought anything from that website ever. She handed me the box that said, this is Abe's mug. They
mail it to me and then put in dispute through credit card company.
Yeah,
easy.
I love it. If you want anything from the swag store, head on over. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on the show notes, things like that. So, always improving is the point of the show. If you want to be better every week, you want to always be trying to be better today than you were yesterday. That's what we try to do every week on the show. It is hashtag always improving. Abe, what did you do this week?
Yeah, so I don't know if I've talked about the Bazaar on the show. I think I might have, but that's a game that I've been enjoying a lot, and especially kind of after the intensity of like back-to-back months with RCs and kind of being in this lull right before Tarkir Dragonstorm releases. I've been trying to put my time into things that are not Magic to keep some balance in my life, and so that's been a game that I've been really enjoying. And the way I've engaged with it, rather than how I have engaged with games like it in the past, has really been to slow down and just explore. And I've talked about this in the show over the last couple of years, but trying to explore ideas more and trying to evaluate different things on my own without maybe going to a resource or to a community hub of information to understand where to start. Really just working it from zero and trying to problem solve and learn from the information I'm getting. And I just think it's been a really, really good experience in terms of learning how that game's engine and what is successful and what is what to prioritize in building a comp in that game has been, and also even branching out from playing the default character to the rest of the characters in the cast and trying to learn their builds and stuff too, just from the ground up, has been a really solid experience where I feel like now when as I know I will eventually start consuming content for the game and moving forward with understanding it better or seeing what people are doing, I feel like I'm going to have stronger opinions about what I believe already and be able to use those beliefs against the information I'm getting to form a stronger position rather than something I know I've fallen into doing in the past. I'm just kind of maybe I'll just net deck a build, right? I'll be like, oh, I should just try to make this happen every time. And so that's been what I've been doing in the last week. How about you, Spencer?
Well, before I go, I will just say I love You're Always Improving. I think that using other games to learn how to consume content, to improve your process, is very helpful in Magic. And that I would never get massive amounts of crap for having multiple of those in this exact segment for Smash. No, I'm just kidding. For me, I was working with the CCMTG Patreon testing team for the upcoming RC season. There is, I believe, 9 players playing in those RCs. 10 if we get the one that I want to go in there. that have decided to work together just from our Patreon and stuff like that. So that's been like a huge part of it, but part of that is like kind of challenging them in some ways. So there's some really powerful green cards, for example, that have come out in the new set, and I have spent some time looking at options for those green cards that maybe could shake up standard a little bit going into the RC. And brewing, which is something that I used to do a lot to help my previous testing teams. So, yeah. Mason?
Yeah, my always improving moment from this past week really comes just from getting really into the details on everything that I've been doing recently and just making sure that I am much more focused at, there's, for example, like let's say I'm cleaning the room and making sure things are back exactly where they're supposed to be, and not just like, okay, I vacuumed and I dusted and I, like threw away, maybe, I don't know, some little thing or whatever that fell on the floor. Or maybe another example of this is like, making the bed and then making sure everything is like kind of the way it's supposed to be and like it's fully tucked on the side instead of like 3/4. Just trying to be a lot more detail oriented. I think a lot of the time I focus a lot on bigger picture stuff, more so than like the minor details. I think minor details do matter. And I just wanted to try to like be more mindful of that in all aspects of my life, from what I just talked about there to things in gaming, whether that's like Magic or League of Legends or just anything along those lines. Just trying to be a lot more mindful and plugged in and engaged. So
I love mindful and engaged. I think that helps universally, and I think that it's not just in gaming but like in life. So yeah. You can join the conversation. You can join the Patreon Discord, patreon.com/ccmg. You can join the public Discord. We do have a tie for first place in our CCMTG / Game Media March Madness with Nick from our Patreon and Vinny from the public. They both picked the top 4 seeds to make the Final Four, which is the second time it's happened in history, and they beat me out by 20 points so far. We'll see if I'm right and they are wrong. Let's go! You can also leave a YouTube comment. This actually helps the show more than anything else other than that Patreon donation. We say this all the time. Basically, every time we have a funny reason to do it, the episode gets way more views. The funny reason to do it this time is that Abe is not wearing a hat. Why is Abe not wearing a hat? Let us know the reason that Abe decided not to wear a hat this episode, and you will get a like on your comment. You can follow us on Twitter or X at CCMTG, and if you can like, subscribe, review, and comment, that is the best way to help the show. Mason, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Mason E. Clark. You can find me at twitch.tv/TheMasonClark. And you can reach out for coaching. I'm starting to get people scheduled for when I come back from my break on the 21st. You can reach out on either of those places I just talked about, or my email, masoneclark@gmail.com, and put coaching in the description for the email so that I know they're there and not spam. Abe, what about you?
You can find me over at Blue Sky at domain More Nothings. You can also find me on Twitter at More Nothings, although I've really just stopped posting there. You can DM me on any of those platforms or email me at morenothings@gmail.com if you're interested in coaching. But that's where you can find me. How about you, Spencer?
You can email me at spencerhowland@gmail.com for coaching. You can find me at Spencer13H on Blue Sky, and of course, the Heezy Game on Twitter. And you can find me every week when we post it on Constructed Clash here on the YouTube channel, as well as the Need to Nerd podcast. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening. Don't forget to check out the bonus episode this week, and we'll see you all next time with another episode of CCMTG.